Hi, I'm Billy Keels, the host of the Going Long podcast. Every week, I'm going to be here interviewing the absolute best in the business as it relates to real asset investing, as well as real Main Street investors. We're going to be having conversations where you can listen in, and that's going to help you to continue on your path to education so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident in investing long distance. So make sure that you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you're liking it as well, because that way you can get every single episode as soon as it comes out. And by the way, don't forget to leave today's episode a 5-star review. Let's go ahead and listen to today's conversation. Welcome to the Going Long podcast, where we are here to help to educate you so that you can feel confident investing beyond your backyard. I'm your host, Billy Keels. And if you've ever wanted to know what it was like to lose $20 million and how that could actually give you the strength to build a tribe strong enough to say F you, don't worry, I'm going to tell you what that means, then this is absolutely the episode that you are going to want to listen to from now all the way to the very last word. Because today's guest not only has over 25 years of entrepreneurial experience, and for those of you that are watching on the video, you probably don't believe that. This guy actually started at 11 years old, started his very first entrepreneurial journey. And also on top of that, this guy put his parents to work, actually in the logistics part of the company. He's going to have to tell us about that. Since then, he's also started over 40 companies, from insurance to venture capital. He's been in real estate. He has his own consulting companies. He's got 3 black belts. And as if that wasn't enough, he actually created his own form of martial arts, which is Yokido. Going to have to hear more about that. And he's also a 5-time author. He's the founder of Financial Underdogs, FU. And he is on a mission to free 1 million people from financial bondage. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome to today's episode, Mr. Damion Lupo. Damion, welcome to the show, man.
What's up, Billy? It's good to be here, man.
Hey, I'm super excited to chat with you today. Super excited. Forgot to talk about this, but I always like to start off with 2 questions, because this is the Going Long podcast. We love long distance investing. And I'm here in Barcelona. This is during the COVID-19. I'd love for you to tell the rest of our audience, where are you today?
I am sitting in the red rocks of northern Arizona in the United States in a place called Sedona. And it's literally one of the most majestic places in the world, one of the most serene places. And I just moved here. So less than a couple of weeks ago, moved out here in the middle of this pandemic. And so I'm actually sitting in an interesting space where I'm in deep gratitude for the events that led to this move. So a lot of people I know have been disrupted with this thing, but for me, it was a trigger event. And I said, okay, what am I going to do with my life? Well, this week I'm moving to serenity, and it's a choice I think we really could make at any point, but oftentimes we need a trigger event to do something like that.
Awesome. Perfect. And we're going to jump into this actually, because that's the second question, part of the second question. So you're in Sedona today. It's a beautiful part of the United States. And also, in the last 24 hours, can you just share with the audience, what's the most positive thing that's impacted your life in the last 24 hours?
The stillness. I mean, literally, it's wild. I now take at least 2 hikes a day, which is, it's a rhythm I'm creating with my life. And there's so much stillness that it provides an opening, and you can call it whatever you want. It's like channeling from God or nature or the universe or whatever it is. And that stillness just brings this tremendous amount of peace and openness. And a lot of our people often ask the question, well, what do I do? And so they're looking for a guru answer. And my answer is, listen to your own thoughts, because if you listen and you actually get out of your own way, you're going to find that you are your own guru. And people have a lot more power than they will admit to or acknowledge, or they have no idea. So being here allows me to hear what I know, the wisdom that's buried because of decades of doing things. And we all have decades of doing something, and there is tremendous wisdom. So the greatest thing is the stillness. And so wherever that is, where you could find it, it might be across your flat. It could be anywhere, but I think that's the greatest place to visit frequently every day.
Right on. Cool. So having that stillness in the last 24 hours is something that you've been able to be in touch with and something that also positively affects you. So thank you for sharing that as we get started. So, yeah, so many things to unpack, man. So many things that you are affecting so many lives positively across the globe. And I guess if you can just help the rest of the audience understand, you've made a lot of decisions in your life, you've had a lot of things happen, and that have brought those things have brought you to this point in your journey. And so, if you could help us to get a sense of Damion, who you are, some of the things that you've done, give us a little bit of your backstory. I'd really appreciate that.
The one thing that nobody would ever call me is a procrastinator or somebody that was too heady, thinking about things too long. If anything, it's more terrifying because I move so fast. And the reason I move so fast is because I've deeply learned to understand through all this experience that nothing that I do, any mistake I make, is going to kill me or eat me. And we're just taught from a young age by the system that mistakes are bad, that if you do something wrong, that your life's over, and you really need, there's a playbook. And when you mentioned my first real business was when I was 11, and I hired my parents, and I was buying and selling video games, and I couldn't drive, obviously, so I had to hire some help, and that meant that I hired my parents. So when I did that, and then I went to college, and like that's kind of the playbook for a lot of people. And what was fascinating is I got thrown out of college for starting another business. So I kept fighting my natural thing, and I finally realized this is stupid. I need to go do something else, like not the conventional wisdom thinking. And it, as I went along, I screwed everything up. And I mean, I lost millions and millions of dollars. You mentioned in 2008, I lost $20 million. And still, no saber-toothed tiger came out of the woods and ate me. And yet, that's this fear that we have. And so we just don't do anything. We play it safe, and we're tiptoeing safely to death's door. And then we arrive and we go, oh, damn. And there's a thing called regret. And that's the biggest problem, I think, in general, is that when you talk to people that are older. I had that conversation with my father a few years ago, when right before he passed away, where we sat down, and he literally looked at me and he said, there were so many things that I wanted to do. And I experienced regret. It was like tattooed on his soul. And it made me think, okay, I'm pretty good at making mistakes and moving forward. It's now time to move even faster with a purpose beyond money. And that's where the freeing 1 million people from financial bondage, breaking those shackles came. It was birthed in that idea that I'm not here just to make a bunch of money. I'm not here just to consume a bunch of fine wine and a nice steak. I'm literally here to impact other people, and the money becomes a side effect. That's the hardest thing for us to really understand and trust. We might even kind of believe it, that if we do the right thing, if we tap into our mission and our purpose and all this, that it's going to happen, but then we don't trust it. We don't actually go do the actions and let go of the attachment to the money stuff. And once we do that, though, it's amazing how money starts flowing. And I'm not the only one that has had this experience. It changes everything. It's a lot more peaceful, even in that respect, whether you live in New York City or Paris or Barcelona or Sedona. Doesn't really matter where you live. It's because you're always with yourself. There's a great book called Wherever You Go, There You Are by John Kabat-Zinn. And once you understand, once you live in that space of trust, it's kind of like the Indiana Jones in the Last Crusades, where he had to step out into this openness and walk across, what he thought was nothing. And his trust was the action. He had a belief, but a lot of people have a belief and they don't have any trust. And so once you step into trust, you truly free yourself.
So being able to step into that trust and free yourself. I know one of the big philosophies, a personal philosophy that you have as well, is this whole the concept of self-responsibility and freedom through candor, through growth, and through really big vision, right? And sometimes we get stuck in not being able to do that. So can you help us understand what was the genesis for this new personal philosophy?
When everything crashed, when I lost all that money in 2008, I stepped, well, for one, I went through this, it's a cycle of grief, and where you lose something and you go from ignoring or denial, and then you get mad, and then you get depressed, and then you start looking for some answers, and then you go into acceptance. And this is kind of this whole cycle. The acceptance part for me was going into a place where I asked for help, and I got help from a guy that I ended up doing a lot of martial arts training with. He was a therapist coach, and he asked one question really for 2 years, and that was, what is true? And I got deep down into the truth of who I was. And it was beyond that, because we can all ask that question, who am I? The question that's more important is, how responsible am I for my life? Do I own my life? The moment you take total responsibility is the moment you have total control. And to the extreme, people will say, how can I take responsibility for the hurricane that hit me? I was raped. How can I take, how is that, how do I own that? And it's a really good question. You don't necessarily own responsibility for causing the thing. You own the responsibility around how you interpret the thing. And so there's a way to be responsible for 100% of everything. What we have, though, is a culture of blame and justifying and being victims. And you're literally at the mercy of somebody else's agenda if you don't step into responsibility. So that's the most important thing. When you go to responsibility, you start asking different questions like, how can I improve myself? Not what's the government going to do for me? What's somebody going to do for me? It's, how much of a raise am I going to get? You start thinking, how am I going to create something? How am I going to create a raise? How am I going to create more wealth and abundance and freedom? It's a totally different question, but it stems from responsibility. Without the responsibility, you can't even frame the question because your spirit won't allow it.
So that whole self-responsibility concept and being able to understand it, accept it, and then figure out what are the actions to take. I mean, one of the things that I've seen lots, or you can probably relate to, is the example that you used is, well, why don't I get this raise? And then it's someone else's fault why the raise didn't happen. So I guess, what are some of the things that we can do if today you're used to placing blame, but you want to get to a place where you have more self-responsibility because, well, we're hearing from you that this is something that's better for us. Well, no one's ever really shown us or told us about how we can actually make that happen.
The first thing that we all have to do, and it's not just the first thing, but it's the constant thing, is expanding our personal development. I don't remember who said this, but it may have been Jim Rohn, who's somebody that everybody should study and listen to. He's like the grandfather of personal development, and he passed away. The quote is that your level of wealth will never exceed your level of personal development. And so if we're asking, well, what do I invest in, or what do I do? The question is, well, what's your next personal development program? Because if you expand you'll have the capacity, you'll have the context. What we tend to look for is the content. We look for the actual tools and the right deal instead of becoming a better investor, becoming a more free person, becoming a more responsible person. That's the personal development context. It's the bucket that holds all the fruit. What we tend to do is go look for the fruit, but we get the fruit, we can't actually hold it, and we drop it. It's like getting a bunch of money, great, but if you don't have the right bucket, you're just it's gonna fall through your fingers. It's what happens with lottery event winners. So we're asking the wrong question. Like, what's the best thing to invest in? People ask me that, and I go, you. They go, what? And I say, you. They're like, I don't even know what you're saying. And I say, you are the right thing to invest in. Invest in you first, so that when you create the wealth with the tools, because we can all learn how to invest. But if we don't learn how to be an investor that's able and capable to hold the wealth, it's just going to go away. The biggest mistake I see with people, they have all this money, and I go, you're investing in the wrong thing. And they're like, oh, should it be some other asset class? Should it be stocks versus real estate, or real estate versus instead of stocks? I go, no, you need to invest in you first. Nah, that takes too much time. I'm going to go to this one thing and I'm going to throw my money into an apartment. I'm like, okay, well, what happens when you make a bunch of money? What are you going to do? And they're like, more of it. I'm like, what happens if you're responsible? I don't know, because I haven't developed myself. Right. That's the problem.
And so this is one of the things that does happen quite frequently, right? That, because that is the problem, as you said before. But when you're not used to actually taking, because at the end of the day, people are, you looking for what's the tip of the week? How can I go in and how can I just multiply my money without doing any work? And I guess one of the things, because that muscle has not been developed, what would you say are some of the simplest ways that you can start developing yourself, or taking your first step in self-development?
One of the things I suggest for everybody to do is get some money live into something. And this could be, you buy a share of stock that you actually pick, that it's not somebody else's pick. It's something that you make a choice with. You buy a rental property, you invest in an ounce of silver, you do something to get money live. My favorite board game ever is Cash Flow, that Robert Kiyosaki developed. And it's because it's the closest thing. It's a simulation, and you feel yourself and everybody around you, and you understand how people react to money. Money is energy, and there's a lot of energy around money. If the moment you put money into something, it's like why paper trading in the stock market is so useless, because it's not real money. Now you can learn some things, it's way different when you actually have $1,000 or €1,000 into something and you watch it all the time. It's like I had some clients years ago. They came to me and said, "Hey, we want help with our money." And I said, "Well, okay, what do you want help with?" Like, I don't know what that means. They said, "Well, we're tired of looking at the stock market and seeing the green arrow on the news that says the market went up and we feel richer. And then the next day it's red arrow and it's down. We feel poorer. It's this roller coaster." And I said, "Well, why is it a roller coaster?" And they said, "Because we don't have any control." And I said, "Okay, so you guys want to get control?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Then that means we need to take responsibility. And part of responsibility is making the choices of where your money's going." And so if you just say, "Well, I don't care," and I know that there are some people that you've even interacted with recently that said, I don't really care about investing. I'm just going to make my money with my job." And that's somebody that's setting themselves up to be a victim. And then they get to blame somebody later and say, "Well, the system, I worked hard and I made money and now I'm broke." That's what they're going to show up saying at age 70. So it's a different philosophy to where you say, "Okay, I'm going to go out and do things," and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to lose money. I mean, it's like, that's not very encouraging, except it won't kill you and you get stronger. And then as you go forward, you end up making far more and creating more wealth and ultimately being free because of the mistakes and the stub toes and the bloody nose that you experienced on the journey.
And I guess we can relate a lot of that to if you've gone out and you've learned another language, or you've learned another martial art, or you've created your own martial art, right? At the same time, when you are starting something out, you want to start off small, learn the vocabulary. You're going to make some mistakes. When you make those mistakes, you're surrounding yourself with the people that are next to you that can help you to correct. But there's no way that if you're not a native language speaker, that you can become native without making a couple of mistakes. And it sounds like it's a very similar philosophy as it relates to personal development, or actually getting started on that path. You have to actually start by taking action. You can't just hide behind the books, I guess, at the end of the day, is what you're saying.
It's true, and it's fascinating if you think about a native speaker. Does any native speaker start off coming out of the womb speaking that language? No, they stumble and trip and fall constantly, babbling and bumbling. We just don't remember it because it was years and years of that experience that we don't have a cognitive connection to. And so instead of saying, "Well, it's easy for this person because they're native and they've always been doing this." It's like when I started off in the retirement space, helping people getting control of their retirement money. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know the wording, the vernacular. I didn't understand how to talk about things. I didn't even know what the rules were. And years of that, now I can go head to head with any attorney, accountant in the world. And that's, and the quote unquote professionals, because I've studied it and I've been in it for so long. And, there have been times where I've been on a stage or in a live situation and somebody asks a question. I'm like, I have no idea what that is. And it's just like, okay, there's always something new to learn. And guess what? Nobody ate me. So we're always having to be open to growth and be willing to say, "I don't know." That's one of the things I think the ego screws us up with, because we don't want to say, "I don't know." We don't want to feel stupid. We want to be somebody that knows. It feels good to be an authority. And so we tend to stay and protect our little sandbox, and then we're stuck in our sandbox forever until we say, "Okay, I'm going to go out there and figure out how to do something else." It takes time. That's one of the biggest problems I see, is everybody's they're impatient. And whatever you're doing, language or wealth, there's a process you go through. Like you don't just meet somebody and say, "Hi, my name is Billy and I'd like to marry you." Like, there is a courting process. Same thing with wealth. You have to court it. Like, you date it and you have bad dates. And, this is a process. This is, that's the same thing with anything. There is a process and it takes time.
So yeah, so it definitely takes time, and you use the idea of becoming an expert in helping others with retirement plans, and I know that one of the ways that you've helped me, whether you knew it or not, is actually through your book, right? Which is understanding more about QRPs, and this one specifically, QRPs for Syndicators, which was one of the books that you wrote. And if you just are very vulnerable with us, sharing that, hey, listen, maybe you didn't know everything when you got started, but I can tell you that in this specific book, there's 186 pages of greatness that are here that can help anyone that's really wanting to understand more about that. So yeah, I mean, this is the process, and this is one of the results of that process of you actually taking the time doing the work. And now you're also another way that you're impacting the lives of millions of people around the globe. So, and it all starts with just that first step in personal development in one specific area. So, so another thing that I know that you're also very passionate about, and this is around your mission of helping a million people, or helping us to be free from the bondage of financial slavery, I would say, is basically the concept of being able to design a decade. And this is something that I think is just awesome that you talk about, because it's something that will impact others. I could tell it, but I think it would be much better if you could help us understand, when you talk about designing a decade, what is the kind of, where does that come from? And maybe you could talk about some of the steps to be able to do that.
Designing a Decade is a program that I designed to help myself. And it's the same thing with the books. I write books to help me understand, clarify thinking. It's a great way to realize how little you actually understand when you have to write it down, and it has to be intelligent enough to make sense. So designing a decade was a process to say, okay, if I want to create something, how long does it take? And I can tell you, you cannot create wealth in 6 months. I saw some idiot story, some pitch that you can create $1 million in 6 months from nothing. And I thought that is a great way to sell to a lot of people that are basically sheeple. That it takes time. A decade is enough time to create anything. I mean, you can have multiple new languages that you are fluent in 10 years. You can literally go from being on your own to having a family and having children. You can be financially free. And I'm talking not worried about money ever again within 10 years if you start off with nothing. The decade is enough time for you to create. And so I said, okay, well, if that's as much time as we don't need 20 or 30 years. For some things, if you decide you're going to go to Mars because you're going to create a space program, probably more than 10 years. But for most everything else, it's, that 10-year process allows you to create. You can envision it. And there was a process going through. It's a peak life process where you have to get rid of everything that is not serving you on that mission, that vision for the future. So the purging is really where you get rid of the stuff and the people in your life that are pulling you down or keeping you stuck. And it is brutal, but it's also how nature recycles and evolves. If you think about fires burn things down, and then the nutrients from the fire literally help things grow. And that's the same thing. We have to purge. When we think about purging people, it's probably the most important thing. If there are certain people in your life, there are going to be a handful of people that are going to influence you, and you're going to become the average of these people. So if you're looking around and you go, okay, well, I want to be financially free, and all the people you spend most of your time with don't think like that, and they think, I'm going to go to work and I'm going to make my 100 or 200,000 euros and I'm good, and I'm going to get my $10,000 watch and I'm good. Like, you're going to basically be that person 10 years from now. So you have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to have a new group of influencers. And then ultimately, the decade by design is designing your environment and your experiences, the traveling, which we think will happen again. Right now, not a whole lot of traveling going on, but there's experiences around the world and around your, where you live, that are vital to you being a human. It's not just about consuming, it's about experiencing things. And part of the environment is with people, the experiences is with people. And then the biggest thing here is the contribution. Designing a decade cannot just be about you. It can't just be about your big house and your shiny car and the stuff you're going to consume. It's got the other C is beyond consumption is contribution. And so finding something that matters to you, that matters to other people, that you can pour yourself into, where you get lost in it, that is one of the missing pieces where people say, I don't have any meaning. It's because we don't have a mission, and meaning comes from mission. And so what is that mission? And if you don't have one, it's time to sit still and let the universe funnel that into you and then get started.
So there's a lot to unpack there. So there's really looking over the span of a decade, that there's a lot that can happen, a lot that you can be focused on. At the end of the day, it's not just you're not going to be focused on yourself. It's really about how much can you contribute and help to also grow others. But the fact of the matter is, you have the time to design the plan and execute that plan. Which I think is great. And I know that there's a lot more that we can find out, but around that designing a decade. But I did want to come back to one of the things, because you talked about, and I know a lot of people are still struggling right now with, just kind of from a mindset perspective, with this whole COVID-19, right? And you in your life have faced lots of challenges to the point that you actually had to kind of start all over and just redesign or reinvent everything around your life. So because there's so many people that are being challenged with that now, I'd love for you to share with us, something that could help those that are struggling today, so that they understand that there's still light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, so one of the powers in reinvention is the power of clarity. And so I wrote a book in 2012 after I went through this process, and I'm kind of reinventing again now because most of the planet is having to pivot. Like things are going to be different in 2021 than they were in 2019 because of 2020. And so when you reinvent, if you're going to head somewhere different, first off, you got to figure out where you are. And we don't tend to want to look at where we're at. We don't want to look at in the mirror. We don't want to look at our bank statements and our credit cards and our calendar because it tells us the truth. Numbers don't lie. So the number of minutes you're spending doing things and the number of dollars, euros, yen, or whatever that you're spending tells us what you value, what you believe. And it also tells us where you're heading. So the reinvention part, financially, it's getting very, very clear and honest about what's going on with you. What are you doing? Like one of the things I have is a very, very high speed clicking buy now finger that goes to a button on Amazon, and it just likes to hit that thing all the time. So I look at my credit cards and I go, dang, what in the world did you buy? I mean, there's like 180 transactions this month from Amazon. Jeff Bezos is like, yeah, man, I get a Christmas card from the guy. Like it's pretty wild. The reinvention, you have to be willing to embrace the truth. And so where do we start with the truth? Let's see what our behaviors are. And that tells us a lot about what we value. And this is one of the values in having masterminds and mentors, that especially somebody that will tell you the truth and will reflect it back to you. And it has to be somebody that we respect. And generally I say it has to be somebody that you're paying, because we tend to pay attention to what we pay for. And when you're reinventing, we need to be able to pay attention. Otherwise, we're going to have a Groundhog Day experience the rest of our life.
I think that's a really powerful point. So one, you've already had the experience, you've seen it, you've lived through it, you helped to coach and mentor other people through it. And you're making me think one of the things that we did here in Barcelona, speaking of Cash Flow 101, initially, we used to open it up to the public for free. And because that was just what we thought was the right thing. And then when we realized that people stopped showing, they would say that they were going to be there, they ended up not showing up. And then once we put a price on it to actually show up to meet other like-minded people, guess what? The show up rate just went through the roof. So it was, what you're saying on many levels, and you can see it every single day. When you put cash behind things, it really drives more of a focus. And when you have that focus, you're really more interested in what the outcome can be and will be.
And why do we do that? Because when we have cash, when we exchange cash for something, it's like when people come to me and they say, well, how much do you charge? And I generally, I do it very rarely where I'm engaged one-on-one, because one-on-one will take me about 10,000 years to hit 1 million people. So I've got to find ways to impact and help more people. The question I have is, okay, well, let's figure out your pain price. And people are like, what does that mean? How much do you charge? And I go, I don't know. It depends on you. And they go, well, I don't get it. Because if I charge somebody $20,000 and they make 2 million, they don't really care. If I charge somebody 20,000 and they make 150 or 200,000, they're really paying attention. And it's worth the money for having somebody that's going to reflect back and that you're going to make changes because of that information and that dialogue. But I need to make sure that I'm not wasting my time. It's not about the money. That for me, it's about the money for them, because I can't fix somebody that's going to be resistant. I need somebody that's going to be open. When are you open? When you've paid a price. You're like, okay, I have invested in this thing. I'm going for it. I'm like here. I'm not thinking about something else. I'm not going to go to my Facebook feed in my mind. I'm going right to this conversation and I'm digging in. So that's the point of exchanging. When somebody pays however many euros to be a part of a game, they're going to show up. They're going to be like, okay, I came here. I'm exchanging energy. It's not just consuming something, consuming an experience. So good on you. That's a very smart thing to do. And I think for a lot of people, I hear people getting burned out because somebody's just sucking their energy. And I'm like, well, start charging them for it. Exchange something. They're just taking. There needs to be a circulation. Yep. You can contribute and you can consume. You can't do one or the other. You need to do both. Like it's too lopsided if you're just doing one or the other. If you're just contributing and there's no ability to consume and connect, then you're just a martyr, and that's equally as bad.
Yes, I would tend to agree with you. So listen. So we've talked about so many different things. I want to keep talking to you forever, and I know that everyone wants to keep listening and watching. at the same time, this is also a way, it would be lovely to have you back on the show. But I want to make sure that we also get a chance to get into our going long final three questions. But I only do that when you tell me that you're ready to answer the going long final three questions.
Oh, I guess I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. You were born ready, man. You were born. So
I feel like a Bradley Cooper movie here.
This is the going long final three questions. So with me living here in Barcelona, I would love to get more and more people understanding the positive experiences that happen here in Europe. So Damion, would love to know, what is your favorite European city, either that you visited or that you plan on visiting soon?
Favorite European city. Big city was London. Really enjoyed hanging out and just wandering London. And then I don't even know what city it was, but it was the countryside in Italy where I ended up getting in I remember the experience because I was in this, it was in Tuscany somewhere, and it was so un-American. I'm sitting there having a meal, and it's like 3 or 4 hours into this meal, and I'm thinking they're literally going to leave and just leave me here. They don't care. They're like totally open. And I was like, this is great. Can I get a check? And they're like, oh yeah. And like an hour later they bring a check, and I'm just thinking, I love this. This is just so cool. Whereas here in the States, it's about turning the table, like get out, next person, next check. And it's like, so those are my favorite experiences.
All right, cool. London, and then that town in Tuscany. So a couple other things as well, right? So you have had lots of experiences in your life. Sure that you've made many mistakes. You paid full price for those mistakes, Damion. And as a result, you now have the opportunity to pay it forward and help others, and through the lessons that you learned. So I guess from a mistake that you made that you think would be very valuable, the lesson that you learned from that mistake that you would want to pay forward.
When I lost the $20 million, the thing I didn't understand at the time, I thought my balance sheet, I thought my net worth was my self-worth. Like that's how it felt. So because they were so entangled, and I didn't just think it, that was reality for me. And I see a lot of people looking at their financial statement or their bank account, and that's where they find joy or fear or whatever. When that went away and I was negative 5 million, I had to rethink my belief system around self-worth and net worth and untangle them, so that I realized my self-worth wasn't my net worth. My net worth was one way to measure things. It's not the only way. At the time, it was the only thing. So when you look at your balance sheet, that's awesome. There's also something far beyond that. And a great one to study is Chris Martenson talking about community and connection. There's a value there that goes way past a balance sheet. And I think it's important for us to all realize that. I didn't know that. And so it's like the Japanese lost decade where they just have zombie banks and things. I kind of had a lost decade of just focusing on money. And that is a very dangerous thing to do because it's never going to be enough.
Okay, perfect. So making sure your net worth is not your self-worth. And you've also cited someone, Chris Martenson, in their book Prosper. So, which actually one of the things that the last question actually that I want to ask you has to do with reading. And now I know that you are a 5-time published author, and you're helping people all around the globe. But what is the one book, just one, that happens not to be your book, but that you would recommend? To our audience?
The one book that's not my book. Goodness, Billy, you're baking it down. You're boiling it down to the one thing. It's a common book that 40 million plus copies have been sold, and it's the greatest book. If you haven't read Rich Dad Poor Dad, go buy it. If you've read it, read it again, because there's something so fundamental there. Like we've got so many problems in our money system and just how we interact with money because we're running from the wrong rules, and our belief systems are based on lies and myths. And just reinforcing some of the information in that book, I think, is one of the most powerful things we can do. There's a million books out there. It's hard. One of the things my mastermind and I decided to do was to shift into classics instead of reading just the things that are like the new current interesting book and ideas from the Harvard Business Review or something. It was going back into classics. And I don't know if Robert Kiyosaki is going to be all excited about being a classic, from historical classic with like Think and Grow Rich, but truly Rich Dad Poor Dad is one of those books that makes you go, okay, wow, my house is not an asset. The rich don't work for money. Like these rules, you go, wait a second. that's what I was taught. That's what everybody thinks. And so I think that book is a great one to read 50 times.
Okay. All right, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And by the way, we're also going to include all of your books in the show notes. So I want to make sure, I know we talked about it already. One that has had a very positive impact on me. Also another that I've gone through personally and read is Unicornomics is another one. So yes, so we'll make sure that we get all of your books in the show notes as well. So
Awesome.
there have been so many things that you've helped us to understand today, Damion, from being able to follow your own dream, even as an 11-year-old child. You've gone through understanding what it's like to have your self-worth tied up in your net worth. You've talked about going through that experience of losing $20 million as a result of that. And one of the foundations, you've then come back, you've been stronger than ever. And now you're on a mission to go out and positively affect and free 1 million people from that financial bondage. And so because of so many things that you've talked to us about, I know that I'm always wanting to figure out how in the world can I get in touch with Damion. And I know that everybody else that's listening, that's watching, they're thinking the exact same thing. So can you please help us understand, Damion, what is the best way to get in touch with you and your team?
But if you want to get in touch with me directly, find me on LinkedIn. If you want to see all the stuff that I'm doing and you want to get access to the books and the videos and the training, it's all on DamionLupo.com. So when you reach out on LinkedIn, say, hey, I saw you, heard you on Billy's show. And one of the things I can tell you that if you want to connect with people, don't go spam them and don't just go, hey, hi, I want to know you more. Engage, and you'll find a lot of people that are super busy are actually appreciative that you took some time. It's kind of like if anybody's ever been on a dating app and you send the same message, it's pretty obvious. Like if somebody's sending you a message, you're like, okay, you're obviously sending the same message to everybody. It's exhausting to send a thoughtful message to every person individually. And guess what? When the person that you're meant to connect with actually reaches that and reads it, they're going to go, wow. And you're going to have a deeper connection than if you just sent them the same generic thing. So for me or for anybody else, if you want to reach out and connect, do it authentically and you'll be amazed at the results.
Fantastic. So reach out to you on LinkedIn. Let them know you heard us, watched us here on the Going Long podcast with Billy Keels. And also, as he mentioned, go to DamionLupo.com to find out more about the different educational opportunities, masterminds, et cetera. And so, Damion, this has been a huge pleasure for me to get a chance to have another conversation with you, have lots of people all around the globe to be able to share in the conversation, giving them an opportunity also to reach out and be positively affected by you, your experience, your knowledge, as well as, just the things that you're thinking about. So thank you very much for joining us today on the Going Long podcast. Would also, for the audience, for those of you that you found lots of value in today's show, why don't you go ahead and share this show with at least two other people so that you can help our community continue to grow with other like-minded people so we can continue to have awesome people like Damion come back and join us, share their wisdom with us. And so that's really it. So this is Billy Keels. I want to thank you for joining today's episode of the Going Long podcast. I want you to also make it a very great day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks. Wow. Don't you love hearing from top-notch experts in the field? When I was getting started, I really wish that I would have had access to such experts. And even more, I wish they would have given me like a really simple list of things to follow so that I could have gotten to my goals much faster and been much happier even sooner. So that's why I've created for you the 7 things that you should avoid in order to be successful in long distance investing. And you can pick that up really easily by going to billykeels.com/7 things to avoid. And also, if you liked today's episode, don't forget to leave a 5-star review. I'm looking forward to seeing you on our very next episode, so go out and make it a great day.